Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome to the Lifestwist Show with your hosts, Terry Robinson, Lance Conley, and Eric Harrison.
Good evening, everyone. This is Eric Harrison, and I am here to welcome you to show number 11. Yes, that's right. That's show number 11. Who'd have thunk it that we would be here 11 shows in? So I'm not going to waste any time. I'm going to go ahead and get my guys in. Number one, I'm going to get my man Lance Conley in. He always comes up with the concepts of the show, and he's always on top of things. So what's up, Lance?
Hey, Eric. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm great. And then last but not least, Terry Robinson, the author, the counselor, and this man is on top of everything, every day, all day. And, hey, you know, I'm just glad to know him, and I'm glad that we're in this thing together. So what's up, T?
Hey, guys. Thanks for the kind words, man. Appreciate it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So, man, we're not even going to play around with this, man. We're going to jump right in because we got a lot of stuff to talk about this issue. And this person, per se, and I just happen to be in Chicago today, so it seems like it's apropos that we talk about this, which is our man Derrick Rose. So, Terry, I'm going to go ahead and toss it to you, man, and then you can just go ahead and just, you know, get it on out there for the people.
Oh, okay. Yeah, man, I have been following Derrick Rose for a while. You know, I happen to be from Chicago, too, so, and the South Side, and grew up in the Inglewood area, same area as this kid, or this young man now. And so of course, last week when he had that incident where he went to the shooting around that morning and left and went somewhere. I don't know if he went to Chicago. That's what they said. I don't know. And without, talking to anybody or advising anybody of where he, of leaving or where his whereabouts, as far as we know. And so I was just a little concerned about him because, that don't normally happen. But also at the same time, I'm also thinking about, where this young man came from, all the experience he's had since he started playing ball, starting, in high school to Memphis, then to the Bulls, and becoming a megastar in his first couple of years. And then he has these injuries, which, didn't allow him to play for a couple of years. And after that, shortly after that, he ends up getting traded to New York pretty much. And so all these things have happened in a relatively short period of time. Plus, he became a millionaire throughout this whole process, coming from nothing pretty much. And so when you put all those things together and you try to understand it, it's a lot of things going on in this kid. And plus, one thing I left out is, right before he signed with the Knicks, he was going through a trial, an issue with some type of accusation of rape in California somewhere. So it seems like he got past that and went right into the season. And they trying to put some things in New York, and they're kind of struggling on the basketball court. But he looked like he bounced back based on what he went through physically. But my biggest concern with all people is psychologically. What is he going through? So just to give us some basis to start talking and working from, I've been thinking about all these different things and just trying to understand what this young man is going through, because I think a lot of people, especially when they're good athletes, and they get drafted to the NBA, or even before that happens, you're dreaming. And I think the dream is to become rich so that you can be free. But there's another deal. Once you take that money, you don't become free. As long as you're doing what people are expecting you to do or telling you to do, you're okay. But as soon as you buck the system just a little bit, you could potentially lose everything. There's a threat. So most people assume that when you make it, you're free. But what I'm starting to see and understand a little bit more than I ever have is that I don't know if these guys are free. And so that's what I'm trying to set this discussion up for today. Just exploring the different things that are going on with Derrick Rose, and how do these young people handle their success on and off the court?
Yeah, And I have a little insight on, Terry, and a couple questions too, because I believe Derrick Rose is a prime example of athlete stress, making those transitions, and he's had quite a few transitions. But the initial question, because I think you have some good insight, just based on one thing, living in the same neighborhood. Me being from the country, a small rural area, and I think it really helped the listeners because, again, one of the things you said early on is you kind of grew up in the same area, the same neighborhood, and to give us a better idea of Derrick Rose's experience. I know it's not going to be, a personal experience, but can you give our listeners a little insight into the neighborhood, Derrick Rose grew up in, that eventually affect how he views the world? And one of the things you talk about in the book is, first starting off is, kind of that survival piece, having those experiences when you're young and how you get programmed. So I'll let you go ahead and kind of share and discuss a little bit about that neighborhood and how you can help our listeners out.
Yeah, thanks. One of the biggest misconceptions are for people that live in Chicago, and especially that particular area, is, I'm from this big city, but in reality, you're from a small town. When you grow up in Chicago, there's sections or areas that you pretty much you live in. That's where you do everything in that small area. So Inglewood in itself is not that big of an area. It's a nice sized area, but it's not Chicago like most people think. So you grow up in a small world pretty much. You know what I mean? We don't really venture too far out of our neighborhoods unless it's something special that's going on. So first of all, you grow up almost like similar to what you just described. You said, well, I grew up in a rural area in Iowa. Well, in Chicago, it's very similar when you think about it, because you don't really go downtown as much as people would think. You live right in Chicago. Well, we don't really see that. When we go there, that's a special occasion most of the time. Going to the art museum, that's a school trip. It's not like we venture down there as much, especially when I was a kid. So I'm assuming it was the same way with this young man. And so at the same time, in the same area that he's growing up in, there's a lot of things going on. And a lot of, I'm not saying it's all bad because it's not, but there is a lot, especially for young men, where you have the gangs, you have the drugs. And so you have to make a choice. Either you're going to be a hustler or you're going to be, you're going to be an athlete. You have to excel in these different things, because if you don't, then you're kind of left behind. And obviously he excelled in athletics, and that's what got him where he is. But now, fast forward a few years, and he's thrust into, a millionaire, this particular status, man, and it's a shock to his system, I'm sure. Yeah, he got the money, but, he probably came from an environment or a home where they didn't have that much money, or not even close to that. So you got all these different things coming at you. Go ahead.
And that's good. And that's good perspective, because, I've been to Chicago a few times, and when I think of Chicago, I think of the whole big, space, the whole big city. And, when people visit Chicago, they think of the downtown, Wrigley Field, Soldier Field, just different attractions or whatever. But what you're saying is, a lot of times when you live in a neighborhood, a lot of times you're almost secluded to that neighborhood, and a lot of times you don't get out of that neighborhood. So it's almost like its own little community, which is kind of interesting, because that provides good perspective for people to kind of understand that. Because, one of the things, just reading it, so go ahead.
And one thing about it's territories too, in a way. When you have different gangs and you grow up in a certain environment and you used to be around this particular gang and not that gang, so you're not going to, most likely you're going to stay away from those areas because you've been conditioned and programmed to do that. So your environment is much smaller than the average person would even imagine. And especially today in the area that he grew up in, where there's a lot more violence than it was when I was growing up. There was violence, but today they have more access to weapons and all these different things. So this kid escaped that reality. And I just want to ask something, because I was talking to somebody that still lives in Chicago, and they were saying they were hearing these rumors about, Derrick Rose, he goes back to Chicago and he drives up and down Lakeshore Drive in a Bentley smoking a cigar. He said he go from one end, and then he turn around and come back, and he keep going back. I said, I can imagine that, because when I was a kid, I loved riding down Lakeshore Drive. You know why? Because you drive down Lakeshore Drive, I mean, it's a total different environment, 15, 20 minutes from where you live. You see these big high-rises, all these nice vehicles going up and down Lakeshore Drive. You made it. You're success. I said that's successful to him. And I'm sure that made him feel good just to drive a Bentley up and down Lakeshore Drive, his own hometown.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people look at it and say, well, what is he doing? Why don't he just, I said, if it's the truth or not. But I can see that, because I love driving up and down Lakeshore Drive. And I don't have a Bentley and never have. But I can just imagine that's success to him. And so I'm constantly trying to think of him, and I always think of Kenny Anderson when I think of Derrick Rose. Kenny Anderson made a lot of money, the basketball player from New York. And he said, man, once I signed that big check, he said basketball wasn't important to me no more. He said I had too much money. I'm not saying that's the case with Derrick Rose, but I can just imagine what this young man is going through, because he's still young, and you throw all this money on him, and he deserves it because he's a hell of a player. And then you have all these things go up. You get injured, then you're out having fun, then you get caught up in a situation with a female, whether it's true or not. How is this man processing this? How is he dealing with all this stuff? And then he leaves the team without letting people know, based on what we know, whether that's true or not, I don't know. So you got all these different things going. And what I want to do is try to find a way to support this young man, because a lot of people throw him on the bus, and I hear people throwing him on the bus already. You know what I'm saying? So, because it's more than just basketball. And that's why I made the comment, where if it was his family, I think, he probably could have handled it differently, because the bottom line is this. When it's all over, that's all you're going to have, whether you still have some money or not. When it's all over, that's all he's going to have is his family.
Yeah, for me, just observing, because, last week I was watching the Knicks on TV, and, Chauncey Billups and Tracy McGrady were talking about Derrick. And one of the things that, from watching afar, it seems like he's a kind of a shy person, an introvert almost, like, he kind of stays to himself. And, I think, and then obviously leaving Chicago, I'm sure that was a huge transition for him, because from my understanding, he still actually lives in Chicago, and even though he plays in New York. But it'll be interesting, because he is still only 27 years old. But, one of the things I want to get back to, Terry, and, one of the things that it's interesting, you talk about traumatic events and how it affects people. Derrick, he wore number 25 at Simeon. And, one of the reasons he wore 25 at Simeon is because it was in honor of one of his best friends who got shot and killed. And again, I think it's most people don't have to deal with that or experience that. And it's a great way to pay tribute to his friend. But again, it kind of relates to the book, and what you talk about in the early chapters is, here you have a young man that grew up in a pretty tough neighborhood, and, like we were talking about a few shows ago, a single mother with a couple brothers and sisters, and it sounds like his mother is, pretty good as far as making sure that he stayed on the straight and narrow. And that's one of the things that, Derrick talked about. But again, it's, it's the upbringing, and now, he makes that transition to Memphis and plays for John Calipari. And, there were some questionable things during his time at Memphis, and not necessarily have to get into. But, again, I think sometimes coaches bring kids in and use them for their own benefits. But and then obviously being, playing for the national championship and then being the number one pick, I mean, he's experienced success pretty much from grade school, junior high, all the way up until he got the MVP. Then he blew out his knee. And, again, one of the things Chauncey Billups and Tracy talk about is it looks like he's lost the desire. And, one of the things people use sports for is to escape. What happens when that basketball court all of a sudden isn't the place that you escape to, where you're able to go and get relief, because it seems like he's kind of frustrated. He's not even having fun playing basketball no more. And I guess what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's where we come in. That's where we come in, because a lot of people are going to struggle with that. And just to back up a little bit, the reason why he wears 25 is because Ben Wilson used to wear 25, and Ben Wilson went to Simeon, the same high school. And so he was the one that was actually killed. And in honor of him, all the best players from forward played at Simeon got to wear that number. So it was almost like an honor to wear that number. Yeah, so that's why he wore that number 25. It wasn't his best friend. It was the kid that played there many years before he played there.
Yeah, and also T, just for history, Nick Anderson wore that number. Deion Thomas, a lot of the greats from Simeon wore that number. I want to chime in for just a quick second about. I have some insight because my son went to Simeon. Miles, the one that came on the show, he actually went there, and so I had an opportunity to talk to him. I also had an opportunity to see him play in school. One thing that people don't realize about Derrick as he was coming up in high school, and Calipari said this too, and people don't realize this, and no one talks about it. They all had to get Derrick to score and really show his athletic ability. Derrick is an introvert, and he had two other guys on his team. He had Tim Flowers and a gentleman by the name of Robert Johnson, a 6'6" guy and a 6'4" guy that was huge. Those two guys were the leading scorers on the team. Derrick was a big-time assist man. Derrick did a whole lot of other stuff. And then when he did do something, it was so incredible that everybody loved it. Then he got a lot of his acclaim from AAU, playing for Mean Streets. And then he played against Eric Gordon and all these other pros, and then people saw how great he was. In one of the state championships, Derrick only had 2 points in one, and the 2 points was an emphatic dunk, but he had about 15 assists. The high point man in the state championship game was Tim Flowers, who had 43. So now that I share these things, man, see, that's what I'm saying. You are a perfect example of what the public outside of Chicago knows and don't know him.
Yeah.
And this is a prime example of what most athletes go through. Everybody only sees what you see on TV. They don't see their lives. They don't see who they really are. And that's also where the LET Group comes in, Athletes Transition Stress comes in, and everything else. But now that I've shared that with you, that kind of changes your paradigm about them, I'm quite sure, right?
Well, right. And I can kind of see that, you know what I mean? Because, like I said, I think, and then we call him an introvert, but at the same time, when you come from an environment like that and you get around all these different people, I think it's more that he's more uncomfortable when he's in these type of social environments because he's out of his element. When he's on the basketball court, he's comfortable. Yeah. So as soon as he comes out of it, because you have to be a sociable person. Yeah. I used to be the same way, too, when I first got out of Chicago, because people are almost speaking a different language. You talk fast, you can't understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Like,
and
why
T, get this.
Yeah.
And T, the other thing people don't realize, Derrick is just about the youngest, so he had older siblings that took up for him. What happens with a young man where older siblings take up for them? They don't have to say much. Derrick never had to say much. Like right now, who handles most of his business? Reggie Rose. His older brother handles a lot of his business in Chicago and other places. So when you talk about Derrick, you have to look at all the other things that are associated with him. You know what I'm saying? So I'm hoping that this show sheds some more light. And T, you make some great points. And Lance, like I said, I hope you understand a little bit more about Derrick by getting a little bit about his background and who he is.
Oh, that's great insight, because you just don't get that information from the general public. And if we can educate our listeners, especially me, on you guys' knowledge, that's exactly what we're here for. And there are
many times,
a lot of misconceptions about.
Yeah, you're right. And many times, guys, think about this. We do this with all athletes, because how many athletes do we really know their backstory on? Lance, a lot of what you said was kind of what you saw in the media, what other people said, and your own perception. And I think that's a part of the transition stress as well, guys. Wouldn't you think so? I mean, what do you guys think about that? Just people not knowing who you are and never trying to figure you out.
Listen, this man came from a small area. You say I came from Chicago, but if you look at it this way, he came from a small town. When you look at the Inglewood area of Chicago, it's small. Then he's playing for two of the biggest cities in the country when he makes it. You know what I mean? So it's like when he's on the basketball court, that he's in heaven. But when you step out of that basketball court, and especially becoming a professional, there's a lot that goes with that. And I don't think he likes that. I don't think most of those guys like it. You know how they force these guys to talk to the media? I mean, they have to do it, because if they don't do it, they get fined. And it's almost like when he left. Now, I'm not saying that what he did was the right way to do it, but he left, and now what he gets, $100,000 fine, which is nothing to him. You know what I'm saying? I mean, but still, it's like, okay, what can you do? I'm a millionaire. I make double whatever millions, and I'm still not free. Because that's how they probably seeing it. And of course, we're saying, well, man, you got all this money. Well, but I think what's critical for all people is to feel like you're free, like you do have some control. And those guys in the NBA, it seems like they have control, but they don't. Because as soon as you rock the boat, you become a threat, and then you might threaten your livelihood. Because once you fall out of that grace, it's hard to get back in it. And most of those guys don't want to leave and go overseas and play ball. That's too far.
Exactly.
But sometimes they're forced to do that. So there's a lot of different elements that go on when you're looking at these processes. What happens to these athletes, especially when they get to that level,
Exactly.
And then you have the media that really thrives off it, of anything that's going on. They're gonna make it look worse than what it is anyway, because that's what sells and that's what drives their revenues. You know what I mean? So it's all about money, and so I see this young man getting caught up in the middle of all of this stuff. Yeah. So hopefully he got enough supports around him that he'll be okay when it's over, when it's done and over.
Yeah, most definitely. Hey guys, this would be a great point for us to go ahead and take a quick pause. This is an awesome conversation. We're going to be right back. And before I leave, I just want to give out our call-in number, which is 323-642-1579. That's 323-642-1579. Call in. Join this great conversation. And we look forward to hearing from you right after this great commercial.
Sports is a common denominator in the lives of people everywhere. Our celebration of sports creates an environment that gives athletes an amazing experience that enhances their lives. Athletes work long and hard to be the best at that thing that gives them so much elation. But what happens after the athlete is done? When a circumstance comes up and they're no longer able to play that sport? Whether it's the high school athlete who doesn't get that scholarship to go to the next level, or the college athlete that doesn't get picked in the draft, or even the professional athlete who now has to retire and find something else to do day to day. Many athletes struggle with this transition from competition to regular everyday life. This transition causes trauma, and that trauma often leads to depression, anxiety, anger, and even health issues. Author Terry Robinson noticed this problem and researched it and came up with the book Athlete Transition Stress. This book deals with the subconscious programming and conditioning that goes on in an athlete's mind while participating in a sport. So if you or anyone you know are dealing with these issues related to transitioning from a sport, pick up the book, Athlete Transition Stress, and share your story in our global community online at www.letgroup1.com. Athlete Transition Stress is available on Amazon.com and on the LET Group website at www.letgroup1.com.
Man, the book, Athlete Transition Stress. Over our last 11 episodes, we have talked about so many different things that have kind of all connected back to the book and the concept that Terry put together. I believe with all my heart that if any of you pick up this book and read it and begin to go through your life and see different things, especially if you're an athlete, it will point out different things that will help you to deal with areas of your life where you're dealing with struggles and don't understand what's going on. I'm going to just, Lance, in our break, you were actually about the question and we had to come right back. So I'm going to kick it to you, man, and let's keep talking about this great conversation about Derrick Rose and even other athletes like him.
Yeah, because, I definitely appreciate the insight because, again, what I heard versus, through the media or through newspapers or even watching it's nice to know somebody or hear somebody give a different based on a personal experience or knowing the person at a different level. And I don't think a lot of times people get a chance to experience that. And a lot of times we're just wrong on athletes, on how we perceive them and what our impression of them really is, because we just pretty much get a snapshot into the athlete, really not the person. And, that's helpful that you guys were able to bring that insight to Derrick. And, with you guys being from Chicago, one of the things, I think about when I think about Derrick is, during that period of time where he blew out his knee, I think that was a year after he won the MVP of the league in Chicago. And the next year, I think he blew out his knee. And then following that, seemed like to be a lot of pressure from the fans, from the city, for him to get back. And, he wasn't coming back on their perceived time scale. What's it like for I imagine, I'm sure you guys don't know what it's like, but for a person like Derrick to be playing in Chicago, his home city, and ultimately, feeling that pressure to be successful, because I'm sure he felt like he carried a load for a lot of different people.
Yeah,
well,
T,
I'm sure.
Oh, go ahead, T. Go ahead. I was actually going to jump in because I kind of got some insight on that.
Go ahead, E. Go right ahead.
But I could tell you what happened. Derrick was crushed because this is what happens. The same people that put him on the pedestal are the same ones that put him in the grave almost. Think about it. They pump him up. They say he's a native son of Chicago, right? He came from the inner city of Chicago. He made it. He was a champion in high school, a champion in college, and now he's in the pros, and he is the MVP. And, man, great things are going to happen for the Bulls. And then all of a sudden the injury happens. So then after the injury, everybody was at him. Everybody was at him. Even people from his own school, even people he went to school with were challenging him. They were saying stuff like, oh, yeah, well, people like Russell Westbrook got the same injury. Why can't he come back? And, oh, man, Joakim Noah, he's playing a whole lot. Why isn't he doing those types of things? He should be doing the same thing as Noah. And people all over the league are playing. They even tried to do a throwback comparison to Michael Jordan, saying that guys like that, he's not tough like the old school guys were. So now he's going through all this different pressure. He even said certain things when he was under the pressure, and everything that man said was taken to a whole nother level and taken totally out of context, when really he was just speaking his mind and speaking his heart. So I'm just laying that out there. And, T, I know you had something to say, and I kind of cut you off. So go ahead, man. Do your thing. T, you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I had my mute on, man. I'm sorry about that. Talking my butt off. But that's okay, man. We having a dialogue, so we're going to go back and forth. But what I was going to say is, you can tell he's a good guy. You can tell he's a good guy. And all the stuff that's going on in the city of Chicago, I know he has dreams of making it better. You know what I mean? Make it better. Because he's young, he's ambitious, and I'm sure he's thinking, man, I can make it better. Just by being D. Rose, I'm representing my city. But that's too much weight for any one person to carry, especially somebody that young. You know what I mean? So I'm sure that bothers him too. You know, who knows, how many people he's lost through family and friends through that struggle, just living in that city, the gangs and all those different things. I wonder how much of that is wearing on him as well. You know what I mean? That I made it this far, I've accomplished this much, and I still haven't gotten the results I wanted to get. And not just on the basketball court, but I'm talking about the city in itself. And now I'm away from there. At the same time, I think that that's probably a better thing for him because too many distractions to be that close to home. And with all that stuff going on, I think that's a good thing. But more importantly, what I want to talk about in terms of the athlete transition stress, a lot of times when we talk about this, a lot of times people think that the transition starts at when the plan is over. But the transitions actually start while you're playing. He's already going through these transitions now. You know what I mean? So you have to start preparing now. You can't wait until you're done. You start putting things in place now to start preparing yourself because he's actually transitioning right now. The transition, it starts before you're in. And a lot of times it starts as soon as you start playing. It starts, the transition. And I think that's where we get stuck because it's like, oh, I never thought about it really ending. I heard people talking about preparing for it, but I was caught up in the moment, and I was having too much fun. Plus, all these different things coming at you at one time. It's hard to focus on the end. And most people, we never look at the end. And, how many people focus on the end, especially when things are going great? Not many people, but most successful people, they'll tell you all the time. When they came into the door, they were thinking about the end. They were preparing for the end. And when we do counseling, when we used to do treatment plans for people in counseling, guess what? We set up their discharge plan on the first day when they enter the door. We don't set up a discharge plan when you're leaving. We start that when your first day. This is what you're going to do, and this is how you're going to get there on the first day. So we start talking about transitions. We have to make those plans immediately as soon as he gets in the door. Hopefully he has somebody that's working with him. But it has to be consistent, and you have to have the right people. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, because that's a great point. Because I think, after he got the MVP, I think most of the experiences were pretty positive. And then, the challenges that a 22, 23-year-old person faces, especially in their hometown, and all the different conflicts. I'm sure, he has all this money. He's close to the neighborhood. I'm sure there's some real challenges with that as far as, feeling conflicted. I'm sure he has certain people pulling him one way and then the neighborhood pulling him a different way, and then all of a sudden the injury and then the backlash from his own community, and then, almost getting pushed out of Chicago in a sense as far as going to New York. And I think his transition's been happening for the last 6 years. And, just listening to Chauncey, Billups, and McGrady, they were saying that, when they watch him play, because they were talking about he's in a contract year, that it looks like he's starting to get his physical skills, but mentally it doesn't look like he has a desire to be great no more. And I'm just wondering if the last 6 years has started to play a role or mentally played that's taken a toll on him where basketball might not be fun anymore. And that's a part of that transition I think you're talking about. And and being 27, what's the next 5-6 years gonna look like for Derrick Rose? And is he prepared for it, or is anybody really working with him on those particular things as he's making those transitions? Because it seems like the main focus for everybody is that contract year, making that max contract. And then, where's he going to end up? And one of the things they were talking about, in order for him to get the max contract, is he going to end up in Sacramento or, Dallas or, someplace else where he has to make another transition where, what's that experience going to be like? So I think you're right, Terry. This is a young man that's faced transition after transition. And a lot of lately, the last 4 or 5 years, it hasn't been really positive for him.
Right. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But like you said, I don't watch basketball as much as I used to, so I haven't really seen him play that much to do my own little self-analysis of what I think he's feeling like and looking like. But I know those other guys, they played before, and they've been in those shoes before. So what they have to say, it weighs a lot, especially those guys. Because guys, both of those guys have faced injuries too before, and so they know. And so how many people are sitting here talking to these people talking to him? Because I think a lot of times when you do achieve that kind of success, guess what? Most people are waiting to see you fall. Instead of trying to catch you and stop you from fall, guess what they're waiting to do? And I don't think it's an intentional thing, but once again, we're programmed to compete. I'm better than you. I made it longer than you. Who's there to help catch him? You know what I mean? I know his brother's there.
Exactly.
But what about some of these other guys that played in the league? You know what I mean? That could say, hey, I want to catch this young man before he falls hard because I've been through that, and it didn't feel good. But I think the competitiveness in a lot of those guys, because those guys are super competitive. We think we're competitive, but I think once you get to that level, every day you're trained. Every day, compete. And so a lot of people, like I said, and I don't think it's intentional, they wait to see how hard he's going to fall because they're saying he's going to fall. We just wait to see how hard and how far he goes.
That's
and
a great
unfortunately,
point.
we think like
great
that.
Point.
So
great point.
Right. So
great point. Yeah, I mean, and the thing about it is, man, like I said, a lot of his own people turned on him. There are people to this day talking about what he hasn't done for the community, and he could do more, and he could say this, and he could say that. But has anybody ever thought or really had the thought enter their mind that he's just a regular, everyday guy who just happens to be very talented? And we're putting all this tremendous responsibility on. I mean, we said he's 27. He's still a kid, basically. So we're asking these young men to transition into these tremendous spaces to do so much more. And I don't know if they don't have the support that you just talked about, Terry. How can they do that? There's no way that they can do that. So that's very tough. I'm gonna take this time right now, to go ahead and we're gonna play another commercial. We're gonna go ahead and run another commercial, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna talk a little bit more about this, not only about Derrick Rose, but other sports and other athletes that may be kind of going through some of the same transition that we believe Derrick is. So stay tuned.
The LET Group was established in 2016. Lance Conley, Eric Harrison, and Terry Robinson came together in agreement to build a model of integrity, hard work, and excellence. All three share a passion for health and creativity, using outside-of-the-box thinking. They all have backgrounds in sports and entrepreneurship. Lance and Terry have over 50 years of combined experience in the mental health field, and Eric has over 25 years of experience in marketing and business. They came together to build a service that would literally change lives. The LET Group offers seminars, books, and other tools to encourage, educate, and enhance the quality of life for those in need. For more information on the tools and resources that the LET Group offers, visit www.letgroup1.com.
Hello. Yes, the LET Group. I am honored to be a part of this group with these gentlemen. As you hear every week on this show, they have a tremendous insight coming from all aspects and all angles. And they bring something to the table that not only is geared to help everybody that we deal with, but also is geared to help me as well. And it has helped me. It's helped me tremendously in many areas of my life. So several things I'm going to say that we would love for you to do. Number one, please go to our website, which is www.letgroup1.com. That website has a tremendous amount of information, tools, videos, all kinds of different things that will help you to understand the concept of athletes transition stress. We are looking forward to coming out speaking and doing many different things so that we are able to get these concepts not only into the older athletes' mind, but even the young people's mind, just as Terry mentioned earlier, the high school student, the grade school student, and even the college student. So go to the website, www.letgroup.1.com, and check us out. And last but not least, shameless plug to the book, Athletes Transition Stress. Everything that we talk about is rooted in that public. So go out and get it today, either on our website or on Amazon.com. Now, we are going to go ahead and kind of open this discussion up a little bit more and talk about more than just Derrick Rose, because Derrick is a prime example of this problem, but we feel that more than just Derrick is dealing with this thing. You may know some people personally in your own life who were blessed enough to go to a high level and play in the pros and then had these things happen. Or just someone who was just very good at sports and just never had the opportunity to make these types of transitions. So, Terry, I'm going to hand it over to you, man, because I think you may have a few people in mind that kind of fit in that mold that I just mentioned.
Well, I would like to take a step back, because I mentioned him earlier, which is Kenny Anderson, which was a great basketball player from New York City. I remember when he was in 10th grade, he was rated as the number 1 10th grader in the country. And the reason why I remember that is because Marcus Liberty from Chicago was the number 1 senior that year. And so Kenny Anderson went on and had a great career at Georgia Tech, and then, of course, he made it to the NBA. And he signed this big contract, and everything was going good. Then all of a sudden, it overwhelmed him. So sometimes I think that lifestyle and that success, that money, all the things that come along with that is overwhelming, because Kenny Anderson came from New York City, and I'm sure it was very similar to Derrick Rose, where you come from this big city, but the area that you grow up in is where you pretty much live. You don't really go much further than that unless you're playing basketball, and that's it, to another gym. And so I'm when I think of these guys, all I can just see is them drowning in just so much, because the social aspect, if you haven't been groomed to deal with that social aspect of what you have to deal with being a professional athlete or even in a major university, because you have these people walking around speaking a different language almost than you are, and you're expected to interact with these people, not just in the classroom, but outside the classroom from a social aspect. And so I wonder what these guys are going through, because I remember when I first left the city and went to school in Iowa, and I went to Drake University, which is a private institution. I can just imagine, because I felt like I was I didn't belong in the place that I was in. It took a while for me to be able to say, okay, I feel okay now. I was pretty much out of school by then, so I can only imagine what these guys, because they're going through 10 times what I went through, from a social aspect. And so, how do you get these people or these young people to assimilate? And sometimes is it good to assimilate or is it bad? I don't know, because I used to always think, well, man, maybe I was better off where I was than here. And people think because they've made it, they may be thinking the same thing. I felt better when I didn't have all this stuff.
Exactly,
so
all this responsibility.
Right.
Right.
Kenny Anderson. And so what happens? We end up going right back to where we came from. And people say, how did it happen? Antoine Walker's, all these different people. How did that happen? He had $100 million. And he lost it all. Was he just that foolish? Was he just – no. I think it was an unconscious thing. I really believe that these guys get to a point where they feel like, man, I'm not worthy of this. I don't really deserve this. And it don't mean nothing. I thought it was going to be something else until I got here. And now it's affecting me more in a negative way than a positive way. So subconsciously, I don't think they consciously try to do these things, but I think on a subconscious level, they find a way to get out. Because it's too much pressure. It's a pressure cooker. You can never just relax and play ball. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, that's a great point. You talk about Kenny Anderson, a lot of these athletes getting those huge contracts. I mean, $80-90 million contracts, and I think Antoine Walker got a huge contract too. I think because you have to be a competitor. You have to have a desire like a Michael Jordan or a Peyton Manning or someone that still can get the money, but it's more about competing. I can imagine what it's like to get $90 million. Like you said, Derrick Rose driving around a Bentley, those beautiful houses. Didn't you say like Antoine Walker had like a mansion, and it was just like 2 or 3 people? You know what I mean? It's like a lot of those things don't make sense, and they almost, because of that money, they almost become isolated, because you have so much money that you kind of move away from your community, because I'm sure Antoine and Derrick, maybe they do, I don't know, maybe they have mansions in where they grew up, but a lot of times they move out of where they grew up, and like you said,
I can tell you one thing: they don't have them where they grew up. They don't have them where they grew up.
And so you almost
they have to move out.
I emphatically agree with that, Terry. You're exactly right. There are no mansions in the hood. Absolutely none.
And you got these guys, man. They have to ride around with pistols, land on their seat, because they robbing these professional athletes. I don't know if you're familiar with those stories. Eddie Curry and Antoine Walker.
Yeah.
They robbing these guys.
AT, one of the guys. That's what I'm saying. I'm so glad that I have some insight on Derrick's situation. But the guy that was with Derrick, which was my man Dre, man, shout out to Dre if you ever hear this. Coolest dude in the world, man. That's what I'm saying, man. He had great guys around him. Dre was a great guy. But Dre was a dude that before he was doing that and before he got on the straight and narrow, that man was out there in them streets. And he was doing some things that was whatever. He was out there a little bit. But Derrick tagged him and tapped him after he got his life together. And, he went, worked out, got everything straight and became like a bodyguard type dude. This was the dude that was like guarding Derrick from the public. So he had to go get somebody in the hood or from where he came from to guard him from the people of where he came from. So that's a kind of oxymoronic.
I saw him on the talk show.
Yeah, Dre, man, and he's so genuine. Dre's genuine, and guys, I'm telling you, yeah, man. And the thing about it is that people just want to see Derrick Rose through the lens of basketball, which is mostly fed to us through what? The media, through the internet, through these stories. But no one wants to try to say, well, man, like Terry said, maybe something happened with his family. Yeah, he did it wrong. He could have been more professional. But also, let's take it into context. Man, what if it was his mama? What if it was something that was traumatic that really affected his mind? Yes, we could kind of scold him or maybe check him on how he did it. But, my God, if it was something that was off the chain with a family member, what do you do? And that's what I'm saying. Even people from his own neighborhood kind of crucified him to a certain extent. So, yeah, it's wild. It really is.
The way I see it is this, we all gonna make some decisions, and sometimes they're not gonna be the best decisions. But I'm $100 million man. Guess what? I'm gonna make decisions I want to make, and we can deal with the rest later. You almost have to take on that type of mentality in order to make it through what they go through, living that particular lifestyle. You have to. I'm not saying he's right or wrong, but I mean, don't you think if you earn $100 million, you should be free now? I don't have to answer to nobody. Yeah. I know that's what I want to be. I don't want to answer to nobody, really. I mean, what do you guys think? I think everybody thinks like that.
But
you like answering to people?
Don't you think there's a feeling of guilt, like he grew up in that community and he owes the community something, or he has people asking him? I'm sure there's a lot of pressure. Friends in high school, family members, people in the neighborhood. I'm sure everybody wants something because they're thinking, man, $100 million. Heck, you can afford to give me $5,000 or $10,000 or whatever.
They don't want $5,000. They want $100,000. I mean, I'm about to start a business. It's nuts, man. And what his agent is probably telling him is this, or his brother, you got to leave all these people alone, man. Even if you want to do it, you can't do it because once you do it one, guess what? You got another 10 coming. What's the difference? What's the difference from him making it to the NBA versus the next person that wins a lottery, $100 million lottery ticket. What's the difference? When you think about
it, you know what?
Like
Yeah. You're right. And guys, get this. I laugh because like I remember seeing like for Christmas I saw the rapper T.I. and he was in a Walmart and he went to the Walmart and he started buying all this stuff for all these people, like Christmas gifts, right? And you know the first thing that came to my mind is two things. Number one, why is a TV camera with him? Because it wasn't like a cell phone. It looked like more of a TV camera was doing that. So that's number one. And number two, it was all set up. It was released to the public. So it wasn't like he was just doing that, going to do it, but it was released to the public. So even when people do things for people in you know who may be a little more impoverished or don't have as much, why do there have to be cameras and stuff? I've known people that's done stuff for people that you never even knew they did it. But, you know, again, Terry, going back to your point of the agents and how they control the whole aspect of this person, his whole persona, whereas he has to now transition from being the dude that he was when he was coming up as a kid to now the superstar professional that he really has any training for and doesn't know how to handle it. Plus, he still has those things that he had when he was a kid that he never dealt with. So...
Exactly, whatever those issues are.
And what's amazing, because Terry, one of the things you said is, you know, a lot of people end up going back to the neighborhood. And it's interesting, you know, when we talk about Derrick, you know, after his career is over, you know, where does he go? Does he go back to the neighborhood, or does he, you know, go off and, you know, do his own thing? I think that pull is always so strong that you feel like you owe people something that, you know, sometimes it's hard to move on. I mean, you talked about Antoine Walker. I think he was giving money to everybody. I think he was helping people with business deals and, you know, loaning money, you know, buying people stuff. And, you know, he's a great dude. I mean, heck, he was playing in the CBA at like 38 years old. You know what I mean? I think.
Yeah, that's it. You make a good point, Lance, because that's what a trap is, and that's why we have to work through the transition. Yeah. Because this is what you say. Where does he go? Well, first of all, he's still gonna have some money. Let's put that, raise him up and say he's still gonna have some money. But when he had his money, he don't really want to be with all these people, these aristocrats. You know what I'm saying? He don't want to be around them. Then he don't want to lose all his money and go back to the hood, because then they can say, man, what happened to you? Man, he a bum, man. That's Derrick Rose, man. He a bum. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So now you got to deal with that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, okay, where do I go? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I think some guys make a choice, man, I'm just going to go overseas and make some more money and don't leave this place. Because people, too, you know, over there, they got different mentality in most of those different countries. If you can stand up being away from your family, they go over there and they don't have to deal with none of this stuff. They just continue to escape from reality, because all of it is escapism. All of it is. And these guys are mostly comfortable when they're playing, when they're traveling on the road, hanging out with the boys, hanging out with the other players and the females too. That's where they're most comfortable. Once they're not in that particular environment, they're uncomfortable. And how do you get comfortable?
The irony of that, you know, you use basketball and your athletic skills to get out and, you know, make a big contract, make it to the pros. But the irony is, after that, you have nowhere to go. You know, I mean, do you really escape? Where is the freedom that you sought, you know, early on? Because that's really why I think why people, as far as you note in your book, is it's an escape. It's a way to get out. It's a way to feel relief and, you know, self-medicate. And all of a sudden, the truth is in the end, does that really happen? You know, is it an escape? Do you feel like you end up getting where you want to go? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And you know what, man? The thing about it is, guys, is that you say escape, but, man, what you're doing is you're leaving your comfort zone. You may have had problems in that place, but really it was a comfortable place, because guess what? Even in that place where you didn't have a lot of money, you still was the man. Derrick was still the man, because everybody knew about Derrick Rose, all in 8th grade, everything. Went to Beasley T. You know what's up with Beasley. Beasley was one of the top middle schools. He went to every top school. He was the man. He was Derrick Rose. He had to win. He had all of that stuff. But then as you go up and you go to Memphis, oh, wow, okay, I'm in Memphis now. Now I got to take it to another level. You know what I mean? Then the next level is the pro level. So every place he went, he had to take it to another level, more pressure, more stress, plus the stress of always having to go back to the beginning and pull those people up. So I think all professional athletes kind of go through this. Actually, I'll take it to another step and say every athlete goes through it. Because the only difference to each athlete is that it's cut off at a certain point. Because, when I went to Drake or when I went off to junior college, my family was like, man, this is one of the first kids to go off to school. And this boy, and he playing ball and this and that. And I get calls, what you doing? How you doing? This and that. Pressure. Then when you come home, oh, man, you think you different, man. You off school, blah, blah, blah. So all those things are rolling around in the athlete's mind, and he has to deal with all of that as well as perform on the court, the field, or wherever he is, the court field or whatever. He has to perform. And then don't not perform, now you're really out the box. So it's really wild, guys. This whole concept is really a wild thing.
And that's why we're going to take it. That's why we're going to take. Go ahead, Lance.
No, I think Eric made a great point when he said that, the real challenge is, you go off, because I was actually one of the first people in my family to go to school too. And then, you grow up in a community and you go off and you actually grow and you mature and you learn something outside of your community, but then you come back and all of a sudden it's different. You know what I mean? People expect you to be the same, but you're not the same. And I'm sure these athletes that, have millions of dollars and, are again exposed to different things outside the community, they probably aren't the same, but everybody expects them to be the same. So that has to be a difficult transition too. So go ahead, Terry.
Well, you look at how you get socialized, because these people want to make money off you anyway. So whether you believe it or not, they're trying to program you anyway, because you have to be a certain way for them to get their biggest bang for their buck. And a lot of times we don't realize this because it's not over, it's covert. You know what I mean? Where you don't even see it coming. You don't even eat the same stuff you used to eat no more. You go back home, you talking about you eating what? Caviar? Really? You know what I mean? Where'd you come from? And now all of a sudden you eat this and you're talking like this, and so you're changing. You're changing, and like I said, it's hard to go back because they changing too, and a lot of situations. So the bottom line is freedom is internal. It's not external. See, we think freedom is external. If I make this X amount of dollars, or if I go live in this particular area, I'm free. No, freedom is an internal thing, mental. And we keep looking for it through external means. And as long as we continue to do that, we will not get it. And so that's why we created this process to start helping people to think a little bit deeper, a little bit further, to explore some different ways of looking at life in general. And like I said, the bottom line is what makes those guys work so hard to do what they're doing? First of all, they're trying to escape some kind of uncomfortable feeling or some kind of uncomfortable situation in a lot of situations. I don't want to say all situations, but a lot of them. Second of all, they're trying to provide for themselves and their families. They're looking to be free, to be able to do and think the way they want to. And when they hit that wall and they feel like, man, all these things that I thought were supposed to happen or were going to happen, they didn't happen. And so now we're left tumbling back down the hill, so to speak. Not tumbling back down and questioning if we made the right decisions along the way.
Yeah, sometimes the simple things that make us happy, because I read that story about the former football player that made $8-10 million or whatever, and left at like 27, 28, went and started up a farm or whatever, bought some land and started farming, and he was growing something like sweet potatoes, and he actually just give them away to people, to the poor people or whatever. You just grow food for people. So that's sometimes the simple things are what makes us the happiest, and it isn't necessarily
exactly
a $200,000 car or something like that.
Exactly, Lance. And man, we got about 30 seconds left, believe it or not. Imagine that, guys. This show flew by. It really did. So listen, guys, I'm going to thank both guys for your insight. It was amazing. And I'm going to go ahead and sign off. I don't think there's too much more we could say. Go check us out on www.letgroup1.com. Get the book, Athletes Transition Stress, and be on the lookout because we have webinars coming, we have seminars coming, and we have many more things to come that will help you to transition from being an athlete to not being an athlete. So I'm going to sign off. We're going to sign off and have a great week and see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us on the Lifestwist Show. When you have a chance, please check out our website at www.letgroup1.com and see all of the things that we'll be doing over the next several weeks. In the meantime, have a great week, and we'll see you soon.